and welcome to Cinema Chat with David Heath. My name, coincidentally, is David Heath, and today we are going to be talking about filmmaker John Hughes, a big legend from the 80s, and he produced a number of films and wrote for a number of films, but we're going to focus primarily on the 8 films that he directed, for the most part anyway. And I have a couple of really great interviews, though. They're going to be bookended. The first one is with actor Liane Curtis. Liane starred in 16 Candles. That's right, the 16 Candles with Molly Ringwald and Anthony Michael Hall. She played Randy, Molly Ringwald's friend, or Samantha's friend, in 16 Candles. And we have a fun discussion about her career, and we talk a little bit about her experience with John Hughes and on the set of 16 Candles, and we'll talk a little bit about the other movies that she made. And then we're going to have a discussion of all 8 films that John Hughes directed, from 16 Candles all the way to Curly Sue. We're going to talk about that one too, I guess. But anyway, he directed 8 films, and we're going to be highlighting all of those. And on the tail end of the podcast, as a real treat, we're going to talk with Tracey Morgan. Tracey, we talked to her before. She wrote that really great book called Searching for Candy, where it talks all about John Candy and his travails in his movie career. And we are going to talking about Tracey Morgan and I, we're going to talk about her new book about planes, trains, and automobiles. And so it is going to be a really good podcast, and this is going to be a good podcast to have during Thanksgiving week. And so enjoy the interviews with Liane Curtis and with Tracey Morgan. And in the middle of that, again, we'll be talking about all 8 films that John Hughes directed.
This is Liane Curtis from 16 Candles, and you're listening to Cinema Chat with David Heath. And no, my little brother did not pay a buck to see your underwear, dear.
Okay, so I am here with Liane Curtis, actor who starred in 16 Candles with Molly Ringwald, playing Molly Ringwald's best friend, and also in that real mega hit, The Girlfriend from Hell. Liane Curtis, thanks so much for coming on here.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. I'm very flattered.
I'm very happy to have you. And let me first talk to you about your experience on 16 Candles. This podcast is somewhat revolves around, this particular episode revolves around John Hughes. And first, let me ask you about your experience with John Hughes.
Well, thinking back on it now as a 55-year-old, slightly more evolved human being, he was a really big kid. He was like a big kid. At least he was when the iteration of John that I worked with. What a gentle, sweet human being, very down to earth, hung out with the kids, like I said. Definitely maneuvered as an adult, otherwise he would not have been able to direct anything. But, great guy, good director.
Yeah, and what was your experience like with some of the actors? Did you hang out with any of the cast?
Who did I hang out with? I remember hanging out with John Cusack, actually.
Oh, really?
Yes. John Cusack used to come to the hotel room, and I always have a guitar with me wherever I go. So I had my guitar, and there's a tape someplace, like in Los Angeles, and I actually ran across it. And we were just going on. It was nonsense. There's another tape like this. I think it's in England with Robert Downey Jr. when he used to come hang out, but that's not what we're talking about. So, but yeah, John Cusack, and like the thing I remember the most is him just doing this riff fun for 5 years. And I don't remember anything else, but like, probably because the time and space we were in just was kind of like that. So I don't know if, John, you're listening, but for 5 years, it's been a long time. It's been longer than 5 years, Mr. Cusack.
Yeah, and it's an interesting film because it was kind of like the beginning for him and also for Joan Cusack was not a well-known commodity at that time. Did you get a chance to talk with her?
A little bit, not a lot. Like I kind of kept to myself. I mean, I'm an only child. I kind of decided who I spent time with and who I didn't, and I was a little too brazen for my own good, I'm sure. But that's, what do you want? False bravado. You turn 18 on a set, you kick your mom out, go nuts.
Right.
If you're Liane Curtis, anyway, don't do that. I did.
And so let's just go right down the cast, if you don't mind. I want to first find out what your experience was like with Molly Ringwald, obviously the star. The two of you weren't as close on the set as you were on the screen. Is that right?
Well, kinda. I mean, she was younger. My mom left. Her mom didn't. She was sheltered. I wasn't. Like, we kind of hung out a little bit before, like, and I want to say it was, like, passively, aggressively competitive between the two of us. Which is just also weird. It's all such a waste of time to go through any of all that stuff. But I guess you have to experience it so that you can get past it, because you can't get past something you don't go through, right? So it was necessary. But yeah, I mean, it could have been a better, more real, fun thing had there not been that weird kind of, I don't know. It was a little weird. But here we are. It's 2020, and we're both just fine.
And in 1984 was when the film came out, and of course another star of the film who I know has gotten completely out of show business was Michael Schaefling, who played Jake Ryan. And of course, you, if I remember right, I should know this. You passed no, you didn't pass. How did
Yeah, no, I did. I didn't do it on purpose. Like, she passes a note back to me, and I'm sawing rock, so he pulls it from next to my chair with his foot to see what the hell's going on, and then sees what she's horrified that he sees. Yeah.
She's horrified the whole time, or at least the first 3/4 of the film. She's horrified till the very end. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, but aren't all teenagers just basically horrified?
Yeah, they are. I think.
Horrifying in turn.
I think that's one thing John Hughes did so well, which was put together a scenario where just about every person, every teenager watching that film could identify with it in one way or another, with one of the characters.
Right.
Yeah.
Because every character, he had the array. Like, I guess if you want to go with archetype, he had the popular girl, he had the shy girl, he had, the geek, he had the geek's friends, he had the best friend, he had the confused, forgotten 15 turning 16-year-old, he had the parents, the wedding, the whole big sister, little brother, like the whole array. Yeah, he did a good job right there.
What do you think?
Actually, he did it pretty well through all of his films,
No, you're right. What do you think happened to that archetype that you're referring to? Why is it when you and I were teenagers, it's kind of like I heard Bill Burr say one time. Whenever I was a kid, there was a penalty for being a nerd, and there was a penalty in the 80s. But what do you think? Maybe you don't know, but what do you think happened all of a sudden where now we see movies where the cool kids are really guys all the time, and the nerdy guy is always the good guy now. It seems like. What do you think happened there? I caught you off guard.
Well, kind of, because I feel like as I'm listening to your question, my brain is just going off like a pinball machine. That could be a complicated answer, but it could also be the fact that I think we live in a place that is polarized for good and for bad, and I think that the parallel of everything from good and evil forces in the Bible to good and evil forces in space movies to McFly and his bad guy, like always picking on him kind of thing. Like there's always it's catalyst. I honestly, like at the end of the day, I think bad is catalyst for coming out of stuff more whole human being. So I think the necessity for it probably is greater than the specificity of it within any story. If that made any sense.
Very impressed with that verbiage. Yeah, very impressed. Yeah, and it's just an interesting thing to me how you watch this film and you see John Cusack, you see Anthony Michael Hall. Anthony Michael Hall's not a hopeless nerd, but he's more hopeless than he really like. He kind of believes in himself a little bit.
It's like he's kind of unconscious, but like there's an unconscious confidence that he's got. It's not a conscious thing. It's like it's unconscious and it kind of evolves a little bit through the end, but like it has to evolve via like getting the cool girl. But then I don't know that at the end of the day, maybe he realizes,
well, he had
all the be all and all.
He had the stones to sit next to the three of you on the bleachers in that scene, and then of course you remember your line.
I do remember my line, and I remember we had to shoot a geek get the hell out of here. Originally the two F-bombs in the movie were Molly, I can't believe they forgot my birthday.
Yeah.
And mine was, hey geek, get the out of here.
So they get two, and then
That came down, For PG-13, you could only have one, so guess, like, mine got whacked, which is sad, because that's actually one of my favorite words. I make it a noun, I make it an adjective, I make it a verb. Like, I can make that word anything. And I can say fornication under consent of the king, too.
That's kind of funny. You have it's so you delivered it with such gusto. You're like, how's there?
Can you imagine there was an F-bomb there instead?
Yeah, I know. It would have been even more impactful.
It would have been the gustiest ever. Like I do have the most racist line in the movie. That's always fun.
Yes, you did. And
that would get green lit today? I don't think 16 Candles would get a green light today. Do you? Too much, like, not with politically correct. We can't do that.
Yes, that's right. There are so many things that are crazy about this film that just wouldn't fly today.
Well, now, wait a minute. Is it crazy
absolve Samantha from that. I mean, she says, no, a pink guy. You know, I can't believe you.
What's to say we don't want to hang out with a blue or a purple guy?
A blue.
I'm sure they exist in some dimension. Like, let's get, what? This world, I'm just going to say something right now. If we could obliterate adjectives completely and totally, like, forget descriptive. Let's just call each other human beings. Let's not identify one another with adjectives and see what happens. Like, I'm so tired of the separation. Like, everybody's unique, but not so much.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Down.
We all want to be people. You're right about that. I totally agree with you. I totally agree. And there was a time where I honestly I feel like I've had a couple of conversations like this on my show where I've discussed we had a situation where, as a matter of fact, I was on somebody else's podcast and we talked about this subject and how we thought, like, you go all the way to Tropic Thunder in 2009 and that was kind of the end of this kind of comedy.
Oh my God! But let me tell you how brilliant I think that film was. I love that movie. Oh my God!
It's funny.
Fabulous.
It's funny, and it was very much in the vein of 16 Candles humor. I mean, certainly it wasn't about teenagers, but
No, but Tom Cruise, give me a break. Oh my God!
He was ridiculously funny in that movie. I've often thought that maybe that was
No one can ever tell me he doesn't have a sense of humor after that.
I feel like that was his best role.
Like ever. Because you don't expect it. Like, really? Seriously?
He was on fire in that film. On fire.
No, that would be fire.
Yeah, fire.
Oh my God.
Well, of course, on all this subject, it's amazing how you can connect that, because on my podcast I talk about movies from every generation, and I've had a couple people on to talk about Buster Keaton, but oh my gosh, Paul Dooley actually worked with him. That's
yeah. My family was in the business way back in the 20s too.
You mentioned that you knew. Tell us about some of the people that you've met.
Well, I unfortunately didn't get to meet a lot of these people. They all passed away before, except for Milton Berle. Like, I got to meet Milton Berle. I was at Paddington's Tea House on La Cienega in Los Angeles with my friend Pam Adlon, and I was living with her at the time in her little condo, and there was Milton Berle, and I just looked at her and said, I gotta go talk to him right now. And she just kind of looked at me and said, he knew my grandma, and I knew that it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So I walked up to him, and he kind of snarled at me, and then when I said, did you know Mabel Ford? His face completely changed, and he said, yes, I knew her when I was a kid. Why are you asking? I said, that's my grandma. And he just said, Booby, come here. And he gave me the biggest hug. He was so nice. He was so nice to me.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. I totally believe that the story went down the way it came, because I don't think he was always real keen on people just walking up to him. He was kind of a grumpy guy, but I think.
Oh yeah. I was afraid. I was literally afraid.
Yeah, but he would.
When I was a kid, I'd go to Sardi's, with my mom all the time. And Charles Nelson Riley, I could just sit with him a lot because he would come. A lot of people would show up after all of the crowd would go to the theater. And that's when the celebrities would come and eat dinner at Sardi's if they were there to have dinner, and not, quote, be seen, unquote. They would come at 8:15, and you'd have a quiet, nice dinner, uninterrupted by fans and all that stuff. So Charles Nelson Riley, he was a regular. I used to go and sit with him when I was little. Warner Klemper. Who else used to hang out over there? A lot of people. A lot of older people from, 50s, 60s. Jack Denny was in love with my grandma. That didn't work out, thank God. Otherwise, I wouldn't be talking to you.
Well.
Yeah. No, but Harry Fox, and Beatrice Curtis did Wax Coil Films, and it was a series of them, Harry and the Bee, and it was my father's half-sister. My grandfather had a couple kids, apparently. He had three. My dad and Beatrice, and then another. And the another had a family who lived in Connecticut, and then they found me on social media just recently, which is always kind of bizarre and cool.
Yeah.
Especially when you're an only child of two only children and don't have that much family, so it's always interesting when people pop up like that.
Social media has changed so many things with the way we operate. I wouldn't be talking with you without it. It's amazing how people can connect. It's just very, very, very odd. You know what, Liane? I wanted to. Oh, let me talk about also real quick. Haviland Morris and Anthony Michael Hall. Touch on those guys, on your experiences with them, and then I want to move on to something else.
Haviland was really, really sweet, and as a matter of fact, she's got a daughter named Faith Score, who's an amazing ballet dancer. She was dancing with the LA Ballet Company, and I got to see her perform, and I brought my daughter backstage, and we went to go meet her. So I haven't really seen Haviland as an adult, because remember, I was 18, which, legally you're an adult, but, most 18-year-olds, I'm barely an adult now at 15,
16 Candles. You've appeared in you were in a lot of TV shows. 21 Jump Street, Married with Children. Everybody's heard of those TV shows. Yeah, you were in a couple of horror movies, but then in 1989 was your chance to be on the marquee with Girlfriend from Hell. What was that like, being the star of a film? I really would like to know. You were the friend a lot, but all of a sudden now you're the star. What was that like?
What a fun little ego trip that was. And funnily enough, I'm like looking at this blanket that Vinnie Vincent gave me.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah, and like I wish I should take a picture of it and text it to you. And I'm looking at his hair going, wow, that kind of looks exactly like her hair. Wow, Vinnie, you're the Girlfriend from Hell. Yeah, like I'll send you a picture of this, and then you can hold it up against the Girlfriend from Hell picture, and then you have to talk to Vinnie Vincent.
Oh wow, that would be pretty interesting. I'd love to see that. And your hair in that, which by the way, I'm going to tell you.
My mother made me throw that wig away. I used to put it on, and it made my oldest kid cry. And she told me that was being abusive. I was being emotionally abusive to my child, and that I should never put that wig on because it scared him. Which, of course, being the idiot that I am, 20, how old I was a kid having a kid. So here, I thought it was funny. She said, "Stop it," so I threw it away. I never should have done that.
I'm going to.
Always kept that.
I'm going to post the YouTube trailer of that on my page, and see how many people have seen it. But I can see where that would be an ego trip because you were a pretty powerful young lady in that movie.
Powerful young lady in the movie, and then like even more funner was that I know they wanted to like maybe hire Tawny Katay, and one of the producers, Alberto Lenzi's like, oh, I want to hire the Tawny, and Dan Peterson fought for me, like, and he got his way, and here I am.
That's awesome.
So yeah, but I had a fun time shooting that. I had so much fun shooting that. They gave me an option, like, to share my dressing room with a cast member, and then I said, no, I think I'd rather share, like, my dressing room with the first AD. How's that? And you can have your little production office and, like, whatever set up, and I'll share with him.
How different is it in general, because you were in a number of different types of movies, how different is it in general being on a horror movie set as opposed to a comedy or a drama? I know a TV show has to be way different, but how can you tell the difference between a comedy set and a horror set?
Well, here it is. I mean, can you tell the difference when you walk into a room, or like if you're in a room and somebody angry walks in and the whole energy changes? Can you feel that? Or like when you sit in a room and somebody who's got like a really big personality and is just very engaging walks in and all eyes turn toward that person because you just can't help it? Or if you walk into a room where two people have been arguing, I hate to use the angry one twice, but like you can feel something's up, like you walked into something because it feels weird. That just, okay, so we're all vibrational creatures. Like, we are all made out of energy. The material stuff is dead last, We all vibrate at a certain rate. And every emotion has a different vibrational rate. So with that being said, horror is going to vibrate at a certain kind of feeling, state of being, mentality. And like every group of people, like if you have 10 people in a group or whatever, that group acts as a unit. The unit is going to have its own vibration that's made up of
find out. Let's see. Now we're recording this, and it's going to be posting in just a few days, so it's timely. So we're still in the middle of all this stupid COVID stuff. I know right now you're taking care of your mother. I don't know how much you want me to say about that, but
that's fine. Sadly, I'm like an open book, much to the horror of any PR person that's ever tried to work with me or agent or like anybody who ever wants to keep anything quiet. Really has to say it. If you please don't. Otherwise, I just talk. Like if I'm not specifically told not to, and then sometimes, oops, it comes out by accident. It's never intentional. Anyway, but yeah, so no, I take care of my 97-year-old mom. She's a jazz composer, and she's got Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, and she's definitely not going to be around much longer, I don't think. Although you just never know, man. That's her story. She's in charge of all that. So I'm just here witnessing and taking care of her body and trying to keep her engaged here and there where I can, and try not to get sucked into her story too much and stay individuating over here and figuring out who I am and what I need to do. Keep the balance.
And I would like to have people. I've listened to a little bit of your music. Tell people you're into music yourself now. Where can people find your music?
Okay, well, I've got an array of stuff up on SoundCloud.
Yeah.
And I think you can find it at SoundCloud, and if you put / Vulcan, like Star Trek, and I think there's a dash, then the letter A, then another dash, and the word music, Vulcan A music. You can find stuff there, everything from covers I've produced on my daughter when she was younger to some of the music that she's no longer interested in associating with, but that I still kind of control. There's some stuff that I sort of mess around with and put up that's my own stuff. And I've got some of my mom's stuff up, some of the stuff that we control, some of the stuff that she sung that was never released officially. But yeah, I've got a nice little cadre of music up there that probably would do well on TV and film and commercials. So, sure, have a listen. Please do.
What's in the what do you see yourself getting back into acting again?
I see myself staying in a flow state, a creative flow state, and if that includes acting again at some point, I am so open to that. It's not funny. I'm open to anything that feels good. I'm open to having fun. I'm open to playing. I'm not open to being in survival mode and being all stressed out and being ego trippy and competitive and like that. If that's what's going on, I'm really not interested. But I would love to make some good content with others that are like-minded. I would very much enjoy that. So whatever that looks like, I'm like I said, I'm open, and I'm here.
Well, you definitely know how to deliver a line, and anybody that watches 16 Candles or that, and which is probably just about everybody at the sound of my voice, has probably seen 16 Candles, and you're the one that tells the geek to get lost, and it's hilarious.
You're not the only one I've told to get lost in my life, That's okay.
He's the one that told on that particular film, but
yes, I'm
and
good at that.
yes, and Liane Curtis, the person with the most racist line in the film too, but you're gonna live with that one for the rest of your life. So,
probably.
yeah, people.
I just delivered the line. I didn't write it. That's like you.
No, that's true.
Don't shoot the messenger, man.
No, I'm not shooting you. are going to, I'm going to tell you something funny, Liane, which is somewhat related, but it's going to sound completely unrelated. What's funny is if you watch the set of the Planet of the Apes film in 1968, you would have found that the people that were playing humans all have lunch with each other, and the people that played chimpanzees all had lunch with each other. The gorillas all had lunch with each other. They didn't do this on purpose. They did it naturally without even any thought. And
that is so race, like not race literally, but like that's so like monkey mind, race mind. Oh God, I'm just going all the wrong ways with my words right now. But it's so like 100th monkey syndrome, and like the boys end up in the living room and the girls end up in the kitchen. It's like it's so weird how that happens. But I'll go back with vibrational stuff right there.
Yeah,
100%.
So that's why I brought it up, is because you were talking about that, and you, I think they completely unconsciously, and according to reports, they unconsciously did this, and there wasn't anything at all that linked. They all went to lunch at the same time, and there wasn't anything.
Okay, so here it is. For me, like this is it. Like everybody's gonna call stuff that they don't understand phenomenon. It's not a phenomenon. People don't understand quantum physics. People don't understand the grid. People don't understand quantum waves. They don't understand neutrinos. I don't understand clocks and all this other stuff in my head. But like, explain people bilocating. Explain people doing remote viewing. Like, it's all about consciousness. Atoms can superimpose themselves, like a I can't remember the term like now because I'm not a scientist, but I understand all this stuff. Like, you look at an atom and what you're focusing on collapses into what you're seeing. Like, and if you're not looking at it, like there's a tree fall in the forest, and if you're not in there, can you hear it? Like that whole thing. Like, it's just weird. Nobody pays attention to what they can't see. And there's more stuff going on that you can't see that actually is stuff because it's energy, but it moves at a rate that our focus is. It's like a radio station that we're not dialed into. Everything has frequency. Everything has vibration. So, yeah, unconsciously you put two heart cells in a petri dish separate from one another, and eventually they start beating at the same rate.
Yeah. It's really an odd thing.
Right.
I thought you might feast on what I just told you. Yeah, I had a feeling you were gonna really enjoy that story.
Yeah, well, I also enjoy like Emily Smith and watching Cosmic Disclosure at night, Beyond Belief with George Norrie. Like, I want to start a podcast. I want to start having fireside chats on recorded Zoom meetings with people like that, and people who have experienced quote phenomenon unquote.
There you go.
Fascinating.
Well, Liane Curtis, thank you very, 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 very much. I appreciate a lot of the people are hopefully going to listen to this, and but just to let you know, we'll be posting on Sunday. I'll make sure and remind you to you want to listen to it. But
yeah, and then send me a link so I can post.
Absolutely, I'll do it. And I do want to encourage everybody to listen to Liane's music and check out Liane's IMDb, because it is very impressive. 38 credits, and a lot of them are really good. A lot of really good credits there. Biddy and June.
Somebody said to me the other day, actually, not to overspeak you, but like it's a kid. Like, I never figured out how would you market somebody? And he said, "Oh, I would know how to market you in a second." I'm like, "Well, how's that?" He said, "Look at your career." I said, "What about it? I'm nobody." He said, No, that's not it. But like for a nobody, every single project you've worked on has had a major star in it. You worked with Johnny Depp 2 times, you worked with George C. Scott, and then he rattled off everybody, and I was like,
out. So just check out the IMDb, and you'll see all the big mega stars that you worked with. And I mean, yeah, like you mentioned, Johnny Depp. I mean, everybody's heard of Johnny Depp. And
yeah,
so,
especially lately. What a poor guy! Like, oh my God.
And the thing is I think we discount the character actors in films anyway. Sometimes the stars just are accidental stars, and the the true stars really, in my opinion, are the Paul Dooleys of the world. I mean, he's got 218 credits, and he's performed with just so many great actors. I mean, that's somebody that, quite honestly, out of that whole cast, I mean, he's the one that has that IMDb that just absolutely bogs my mind. Your IMDb, I'd put it up against Molly Ringwald's. I mean, because she was a star more often doesn't mean that she's got the better set of films, and I really don't know that she does. So I think after this, you got The Breakfast Club, and it kind of went downhill a little bit for her. But anyway, I don't want to say too much about that.
But you know what? She's actually also very intellectual, and she's into reading and writing. She's on Reddit. She's very well spoken, as an adult. I know she likes her jazz music, and I saw her in Sweet Charity, and it was good. It was okay. And I'm not saying this to be mean. It's there are better actors, there are worse actors. I'm not gonna say Molly's the best actress I've ever seen. Oh my God, no. Kate Blanchett. I'm sorry. There's a list of others that are really top notch. Meryl Streep. I'm not putting Molly Ringwald in the Meryl Streep pile, but I'm also not gonna put Scream Queens in a pile with Molly Ringwald. It's all vibrational.
Yeah, no, you're right.
It's not better or worse. It's just different.
No, that's all valid. I definitely appreciate that. Yeah, but yeah, you've got a really good resume. And one more thing, because this podcast, even though our conversation resolved mostly about 16 Candles, your experience, but I would like for you to give a 1-minute tribute to John Hughes.
I think John Hughes was one of a kind. His sense of humor was very unique in that he definitely rode a fine line, which kind of got crossed once or twice with my lines. But he had a knack for bringing reality to, or comedy to reality, or reality to comedy. It does work both ways,
Yeah.
And he made movies that you identify with the characters every time, no matter what, So the guy was very talented, and I'm sorry he passed away when he did, because I think had he lived, there would have been more John Hughes movies.
Yeah, that's something that I talk about fairly extensively. Later in the podcast, your portion is going to be the first part, because 16 Candles was the first movie he directed, and then I'm going to be talking about all of his films in kind of monologue form, and then I'm going to have an interview with Tracey Morgan, a lady who wrote a book about planes, trains, and automobiles. So that's how it'll wrap up. So everybody now knows the way it's going to go, and but Liane, I really appreciate you, and I can't tell everybody, just so everybody knows.
I started rambling, but even because I did ramble, I am going to circle back. I don't know what your demographic is. I don't know exactly, but my daughter...
65 plus, unfortunately.
My daughter's not going to be anything anybody 65 plus wants to see. She's 21 years old and into music, and it's kind of racy these days. But she's a good gal. So go to my SoundCloud. Then you can listen to some Jack McKenzie music that is more palatable for our age group, I will say.
Yes, please do. Please check that out. But Yeah, it's just, I have a lot of, really probably my highest demographic really is 45 to 54, which is, but
you use juxtaposed numbers like that.
it changes. Well, it just changes. It depends on the show. I mean, I interviewed Ben Kasalki a few months ago. I don't know if you heard of him, but he directed a kind of a small film, another teenage film called Banana Split. It's a fun movie. It's a really fun movie. It's very good. It's really well done. It's also a teenage angst film, but it's from 2018. And he and I had a really good conversation, and I only had 18 to 24-year-olds looking at that one, or listening to that one. Yeah, I'm fortunate enough to be able to. I got an idea. Not everybody identifies their age, but I kind of have an idea of the age group that people listen. And
so I'm 55, but I have like a 12-year-old half the time, so you think that 25 should be my demographic.
I think this one will be the 45 to 54 and the 55 to 64 crowd. Which makes sense. So, well, Liane, and by the way, I want to say thank you again, because I want my whole audience to know that you were kind enough to do this twice with me, because our first.
I wasn't gonna rat you out.
I'm ratting myself out. I want to say thank you, because Liane was very kind to come back on a second time. We had a conversation very similar to the time, and some of the conversation was similar. But Liane was kind enough to come on the show and re-record with me. And after I kind of said please, and Liane was.
Now you're gonna have to put up with stupid pet tricks because you said that. Yeah, Licky. Whoa, licorice. This is my African grandparent. What does a crow say? What does a crow say? Do it again. What's a crow say? No, what's a crow say? Oh, come on. She did it before. I don't know if you heard it.
She knows she's being recorded. Yeah, that's.
Yeah, well, no, she actually did, but I just I talk too much. If she did it before I asked, because she's a notorious beggar. When this bird sees something that she wants to eat, she either starts meowing, because she thinks if she meows, she's going to get it, because I ask her, what does a kitty say? And she'll say meow, and then she'll say, what does a crow say? And she'll say, oh, oh. And I used to teach her, I used to use Jacqueline. I used my daughter. And I would use almonds. And I'd say, Licky, what does a kitty say? And she wouldn't say anything. And then I would give the almond to my daughter, because my daughter would get it right. Then I would tell my daughter, get it wrong. And she would do it, and then I would say, no. And I'd go back to the bird. Okay, ready? What does a crow say? Good girl.
There you go.
Yeah, kitty's too common. We gave him crow. All right, now I'm going to go eat crow. No, I won't. I will.
Well, Liane, just keep in touch, and I may have a Benny and June podcast in my future, so keep that in mind. I may ask you to come back on again.
Oh gosh, you know who and I never say you should anything, because that's just so rude to tell anybody they should anything, but you should try to find Mary Stuart Masterson. I think she's in upstate New York, and I think she is she's adulting, but she's staying very creative from what I've heard. But what a nice gal. What a good gal she is. She was so nice to me. Oh my God.
She seems like a very warm person. I've gathered
She
that.
was so nice. Fried green tomatoes has got to be one of my most devastatingly, stab you in the heart, favorite films.
Yeah, it's a good one. That's a good one, no question.
Yeah. She's a good actress, very underrated, and I wish she would come back out.
Yeah, maybe she's got a pile of money sitting somewhere, and she's just waiting for that pile to go away. Who knows?
Who knows? Maybe she's just not interested. I used to run into Lori Petty all the time.
Yeah, Yeah, she just disappeared, didn't she?
Well, because there aren't any good scripts, man. So I'd rather just, ride around Venice on her bike being Lori Petty.
We could talk. I could talk for hours about that particular subject, about how movies have, it's really changed a lot, and it's like there's so many comic book movies.
Devlin complains because he says there are 4 studios and they've got all the movies, like everything. It's so weird. Okay, so what happens? One day there's going to be one studio that controls everything.
Yep.
Everything's going toward like a one world order. So like.
It's either a huge budget film or it's a small indie film.
3 cents and favors. Yep.
Yeah, and please do this for me, that kind of thing. Yeah. The casting people in films is not easy because there's so many people like you that have experienced Hollywood in a different way, and then people are like, I don't know if it's really worth it. That's what people are thinking.
It's weird too because once you say one thing, like if you say how you feel about Hollywood, and like honestly the storylines and like all these shows that are out that like lead kids by their nose, like I kind of didn't want to be a party to indoctrinating people into adopting some kind of paradigm. It's just bullshit.
Yeah.
Like we peddle bullshit. We peddle Kardashians, we peddle selfies, we peddle, like, you gotta look perfect, we peddle all kinds of things that, like, in society, in the real world, makes people mentally ill. Like, and it's all a control mechanism to keep people, like, and this is where I get a little conspiracy theory, Like, and if that's I don't wanna make money doing that. I'd rather starve than make people, influence people for the yucky. I won't do it.
Yeah, totally.
No music. Sit here and draw aliens. Leave me alone.
Well, Liane, I will let you get back to your evening, and
let me get back to drawing my aliens all by myself up here in my tower.
I'm really looking forward to posting this because I think it's going to be a pretty popular one, and I'm also going to post the podcast that I appeared on, the one with a couple of my friends that did one on planes, trains, and automobiles in specific. And so I'll post that one later in the week on Thanksgiving Day is when I can actually post that. So if you're interested, you can listen to that one as well. But anyway, well, you take care, Liane, and please stay in touch. We're gonna do something again, and I will talk to you again soon.
All right, man. Don't be a stranger. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate you.
Oh, Liane, you're the best. Thank you so much. Okay, so I am here with Liane Curtis. Liane Curtis for coming on the show. Sorry about that little technical snafu, but we are appreciative of her coming on. And now we'll go to the next segment of the show where we're going to talk about all 8 of John Hughes' directed films.
You have your finger so much on the pulse of what is happening with young people right now, and how do you maintain that? I mean, do you go and hang out with them, or
Well, most of the actors have been pretty young, so I've been around them in a working relationship. I get a lot of mail, which is great. I mean, one letter to get everything that you ever want to know about what's going on with these people. And I'm just real true to those feelings. I mean, what it's like to feel completely grown up, completely capable of being responsible for yourself, and having someone saying, in the midst of all of your problems, what time are you going to be home for dinner? I mean, I remember that stuff. Or not being given credit for the scope of the problem. And your father saying, 3 years from now you'll laugh about it. Well, you're not laughing right now.
Is there a character in Some Kind of Wonderful that you really...
Hello and welcome to Cinema Chat. This is the podcast where we talk about the movies and the people that made them. I am your humble host, David Heath, and I am happy today to record a podcast on the man you just heard talk, John Hughes. Probably everybody listening to my voice knows who John Hughes was. If you don't know who John Hughes was, then you are probably under 30 years old. John Hughes was a director, a writer, and also a producer, and he produced quite a lot of very big projects, including Home Alone. You might have heard of it. A little movie from 1990 starring Macaulay Culkin and Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern. But I am not real. The podcast isn't so much to talk about the movies he produced. I am going to narrow it down mostly, even though we're going to talk about the ones he produced and wrote for. We're going to talk a little more extensively on the movies that he had directed. And now, you might be surprised to know he only directed 8 films. It's really not a large number of films if you think about it, but from 1984 to 91, they were all directed in that time frame. Yeah, he's had his heart and hand on the pulse of the teenager back in the 80s, and there's something kinetic that he had with with his ability to relate to the teenager. It was really kind of amazing. His films evolved a little bit. They got a little bit away from the teeny bopper type movies, as my mom would call them, to more family oriented. And when we get to the end of the podcast, we'll discuss the decline of his career. But anyway, we're going to talk about the 8 films first that he directed. But before we do that, let me also talk a little bit about who John Hughes was. He grew up in Michigan and then moved to Chicago with his family as a youngster. His movies that he made tended to reflect living in suburbia, and as he did, son of an auto worker. He married Nancy Ludwig in 1970, and they had 2 children. He got his start in the movie business with writing for a couple of National Lampoon's movies. One that is not very well known, called National Lampoon's Class Reunion. Kind of a silly movie, but didn't at all reflect on what he would eventually accomplish as a director, and also as a writer for that matter. Then he would go on to write for National Lampoon's Vacation and Mr. Mom, 2 really big films from 1983. So let's get into the 8 films that John Hughes directed. He first directed 16 Candles in 1984.
How about you underpants for 10 minutes?
That's the voice of Anthony Michael Hall talking to Molly Ringwald in 16 Candles. The film also starred Michael Scheffling, who starred as Jake Ryan, and I think people know Jake Ryan a lot more than they know Michael Scheffling. But it also had some veteran actors such as Billy Bird, Edward Andrews, Max Showalter, John and Joan Cusack made appearances in the film too. And it was the first appearance for both, I believe.
So, what's the story? You got a guy or?
Yeah, 3 big ones, and they left with blood.
Her name is Samantha Baker, and today is her 16th birthday.
She's gotten her boobies.
I better go get my magnifying glass.
They forgot my birthday. Classic. This is the single worst day of my entire life.
Universal Pictures presents 16
Samantha Baker, played by Molly Ringwald, is somebody who turned 16 and her parents forgot her birthday. Her grandparents forgot her birthday. Both sets of grandparents forgot her birthday. And somehow her dad, played by Paul Dooley, the legendary character actor, finally remembered. But anyway, spoiler alert, sorry about that. But he finally remembered late into the film. But Samantha is played again by Molly Ringwald. She is somebody that is completely full of angst. She is somebody that really adores Jake Ryan, but she realizes Jake Ryan doesn't know she exists. Or wait a minute, does he know that she exists? But anyway, the film is all about her trying to chase after him, and Anthony Michael Hall plays Ted, the geek, and he comes after Samantha. Well, eventually things end up kind of crazy and tangled, but this film is funny, and it remains in my heart to be the best of the John Hughes directed films. Now, as you may note, if you've seen the film, then you know there's a lot of out of bounds humor, especially for a PG movie. This movie was PG. Of course, to be fair, the PG-13 rating was not available or not out yet, and this came out right before the PG-13 rating came in. But there's all kinds of sex jokes. There's nudity. There's lots of racial humor, and it's just it smells like an R-rated film. I remember seeing it. I was 13 years old. Now I've given away my age. I was 13 years old at the movie theater, and I felt like I was watching something that my mom wouldn't have approved of. But it was PG-13. Or it was PG. The PG-13 wasn't available. But, yes, there's all kinds of blue humor in it. The jokes come pretty rapid pace. It's a movie that really kind of changed a lot. I think it changed the way a lot of teenage movies would be after it. There are a lot of people that would say Fast Times at Ridgemont High would be the movie that changed, and I suppose there's a lot of merit to it, but I think 16 Candles brought it to another level, where they had the humor come at you fast and furiously, and I think Fast Times at Ridgemont High at times did that, but I think there's moments where it's a lot slower of a film. I'm talking about Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which was 2 years prior to 16 Candles. I think there's probably a correlation between the two, and I think 16 Candles might have been influenced a little bit by Fast Times at Ridgemont High, but I think ultimately 16 Candles is a much different film, and in my opinion, it's a better film, and I know a lot of people will probably disagree with me on that, but I think it's a better film because it does move at a brisk pace, and it doesn't spend a lot of time doing anything and except there are a couple of moments where they have to put together potential romance between Sam and Jake, Samantha and Jake. But 16 Candles it kind of put the shed light on all kinds of teenagers and the angst that they feel. You had all these different types of teenagers, high schoolers. They were split up. You've got freshmen that don't feel like they belong with the rest of the school. You got some richer people and you've got some poorer people. You've got some better looking people and not so good looking people. And there's it does a lot to show the divide, but it's not really making social commentary per se. Not a lot anyway. But. And there's date rape jokes in it. It is cringeworthy. If you haven't seen it for 30 years, you're going to cringe a little bit. You really will. If you can get past some of the crazy humor from it, then you're still going to love it. But it is cringeworthy.
There's your Chinaman. Oh, thanks, Fred. Hi, John. What the? What is going on around there?
What's happened? Right here in front of his mouth. Howard, he's dead.
Oh, shit. I paid $7,000 for a wedding. I'll never see it.
Oh, watch your language, Mr. Dirty Mouth.
Oh, my God, he is still warm.
Oh, good.
You're on. Canine cologne. Oh, no more Yankee, my Winky. The donga need food. Hell, he's 3 sheets to the wind. He's drunk as a skunk. Oh, why don't you shut up, Fred? Shut up. Dong. Dong.
Don, Grandpa is talking to you.
Where is my automobile? Automobile? Leg. Big leg.
And yes, there's also drunk driving humor, and it's oh boy, you watch this movie and you will cringe. If you haven't seen it in a long time. That voice you heard, Long Duck Dong, played by Getty Watanabe, got a lot of flack for playing that role. But the movie's not saying without Long Duck Dong. Anyway, so we'll move on to the next film directed by John Hughes, which did not garner a PG rating. In fact, it did garner an R rating, and it was The Breakfast Club from 1985, and that also starred Molly Ringwald and Anthony Michael Hall, but the film was a much more serious film and had Judd Nelson, Ali Sheedy, and Paul Gleason as the everybody's favorite, Mr. Vernon, Vice Principal Vernon. What a nice guy. But let's talk about The Breakfast Club for a minute. It had a $1 million budget and made over $35 million, so pretty good take, and a little bit more than what the 16 Candles had made the year before. But it's a lot more serious than 16 Candles. Now, this movie also has some stuff in it, some content that's not really gonna fly anymore. There's some really dumb pot humor in it. I mean, it's just absolutely dumb. And I mean, there's a moment where these kids are smoking pot, and they act like they just took amphetamines or something. I don't know, but they act crazy and wild instead of acting chill. But in any case, the movie really brings home the 80s individualism that all the kids once again, lots of angst. They felt a lot of angst. And basically these kids are all in detention. And there's 5 of them in detention. And they are all in there for various purposes. And they come from 5 totally different types of households. And they have at least 4 different sets of friends. And it's really kind of a poignant film, and it shows how 5 people that are not like each other can actually relate with each other. But it shows how the kids can get along when they're forced to get along.
Any questions?
Yeah, I got a question. Does Barry Manilow know that you raid his wardrobe?
Give you the answer to that question, Mr. Bender, next Saturday. Don't mess with the bull, young man. You'll get the horns.
What was that ruckus? Anyway, so in the film, we find out what the ruckus was. We find out who shut the door and all kinds of other things. But Principal Vernon is kind of a heavy, well, not kind of, he is a heavy. He is a villain, even. In the film, John Hughes demonizes the man. However, a little more than midway through the film, spoiler alert, there is a moment where, if you haven't paid attention to it, if you haven't really noticed, there's a poignant moment in the film where Principal Vernon is talking to the janitor, and he says,
This point here, girl, I've been teaching for 22 years. And each year, these kids get more and more arrogant. Oh, bullshit, man. Come on, Vern, the kids haven't changed, you have. You took a teaching position because you thought it'd be fun, right? Thought you could have summer vacations off? Then you found out it was actually work. That really bummed you out. These kids turned on me. They think I'm a big fucking joke. Come on. Listen, Vern, if you were 16, what would you think of you, huh? Hey, girl, you think I give one rat's ass what these kids think of me? Yes, I do. You think about this. When you get old, these kids, when I get old, they're going to be running the country. Yeah? Now, this is the thought that wakes me up in the middle of the night. That when I get older, these kids are going to take care of me. I wouldn't count on it.
so we have a moment there where Principal Vernon is actually vulnerable, and we see him as a human and not just like this wooden villain. And he has a moment where he says these kids turned on him. The kids changed. And the janitor is saying, no, they didn't. You changed. And so it kind of is like, I heard somebody talking about this film a while back. I can't remember where I heard it, but I thought it was a really good point. And that's that when we're younger, I'm a parent of 2 grown children and now a grandparent. But when you are a young person, 15, 16, 17, you tell yourself and you promise yourself that you're not going to be this way with your kids, or you're not going to do certain things. And with a lot of those things, I indeed kept my promise, but there are some things that you're not going to keep your promise on, and you forget that you promised yourself. And when you're 15, and then you flip it to when you're 35, and all of a sudden you've got a different angle to look at things. So it's very poignant. There's also another moment where Bender, played by Judd Nelson, has a moment with Principal Vernon, and it is not a pretty sight. And there is some intense conversation in this film. There's talk about suicide, and about how one class of people are not as good as the other, or is not as good as the other. We see Anthony Michael Hall struggling kind of as a nerd type guy, and he is somebody that belongs to an academic club, and the others belong to either athletic clubs or don't belong to clubs at all because they're too good for that. But anyway, it shows you how the five kids are so different, and then how even more different Principal Vernon is. And Principal Vernon, there's a lot of Principal Vernons out there that are just kind of burnt out. They've been teaching 30 years, and then all of a sudden they think, the kids are different. Well, not really. Sometimes mores definitely change, and the mores have changed. But kids are still kids. Teenagers are still teenagers. And so it makes it very interesting. But there's a wonderful soundtrack in it, headlined by the song "Don't You Forget About Me" by Simple Minds. And I failed to talk about the 16 Candles soundtrack. I want to apologize for scooting back to 16 Candles, but it also had an excellent soundtrack involving songs like Rebel Yell and If You Were Here and True by Spandau Ballet. Some really good mid-'80s songs, and I'm definitely showing my age by talking about that. But the Don't You Forget About Me, Simple Minds, that song is associated permanently with this film, Breakfast Club. And what a strong script. That's only performed in the school. All the scenes are in the school or right outside the school in the parking lot. And so, thus the $1 million budget, So, but it did, and I messed up here when I said earlier $35 million. It actually was $52 million take. So it made 52 times the amount of money that was invested. So nice job. John Hughes did it again. The movies get a little different though. We have the next film John Hughes directed was Weird Science, which also has Anthony Michael Hall. And it also has Elin Mitchell-Smith and Kelly LeBrock, the famous model from the mid-'80s, and anyway, it also has Bill Paxton and Robert Downey Jr. When they were not so well known. Bill Paxton plays Chet. Oh my gosh, Chet is there's your villain in this movie. He is not a nice brother, not at all.
That's not a bad idea. Why? Making a girl. Actually making a girl. This is Wyatt and Gary.
I give her one digit memory glands.
Something's about to change their world. Something out of this world. She's alive! Alive!
What would you little maniacs like to do first?
It's all in the name of science. Weird science.
You would be a party animal. You had to learn to live in the jungle.
Not here. No way. She is turning their lives.
Trust me for once, will you?
What is going on?
Gary, I don't know.
Their minds. And their house. Upside down.
It's seriously affecting your sex life.
It's completely unnatural.
You realize it's snowing in my room?
Totally unbelievable. And definitely weird. They went from zeros to heroes in one fantastic weekend.
That's so good.
Universal Pictures presents a John Hughes film.
came out 1985 as well, and the film had called, strangely enough, Weird Science. But once again, Anthony Michael Hall plays the nerd, and he is this time teamed up with his friend Gary, Wyatt. Anthony Michael Hall plays Gary, and so Gary and Wyatt decide, let's make a girl, and so they make a girl from their computer, and out comes Kelly LeBrock. And so they are now all of a sudden popular because they have Kelly LeBrock, or share her as a girlfriend. So, funny movie, definitely not serious like Breakfast Club was, or even 16 Candles for that matter. But it still does show the nerds can triumph. And the 80s was a much different time when you were, like I heard Bill Burr say one time, when I was in high school, there was a price to pay for being a nerd. Well, that price isn't anymore. It's kind of flipped a little bit. And that's goes to what I was talking about earlier with the mores changing. It's more, they're a lot more inclusive than they used to be. I mean, I'm talking about teenagers. The two generations after me are a lot more inclusive and of everybody. So it's a very interesting dynamic. But in the 80s, it was definitely not like that. And something had to happen for you to be popular. You had to be a football player, or you had to do something to be popular. I mean, if you were really great looking, that would help. But if you had money, that would help. But you had to have something going your way. But Weird Science, a fun film. And despite the trailer being a little racy, the film in general is not nearly as definitely not nearly as vulgar as the Breakfast Club tended to be at moments, and not as much as 16 Candles either. So it's very interesting now, but this does get the PG-13 rating that 16 Candles could not merit because of the lack of a PG-13 rating. But this was followed up by a much more innocuous film, Ferris Bueller's Day Off in 1986. And that's something you can watch with your mom or your kids, and nobody's really offended by it. Starring Matthew Broderick, Alan Ruck, and Mia Sara.
Here. Adam Lee.
Here.
Adamowski. Adamson.
Here.
Adler.
Here.
Anderson. Here. Bueller.
He's sick. My best friend's sister's boyfriend's brother's girlfriend heard from this guy who knows this kid is going with the girl who saw Ferris pass out at 31 Flavors last night. I guess it's pretty serious.
Thank you, Simone.
No problem whatsoever.
Fry.
And that was the great Ben Stein, who plays this as the teacher, trying desperately to find out if Ferris Bueller was in the class. Well, he indeed was not. Instead, he was out and about having fun with his friend Cameron, played by Alan Ruck. And this film, very much like Breakfast Club, has a principal that is definitely a villain, Principal Rooney. He is the true villain in this film, and he has no regard for anyone. All he wants to do is catch Ferris Bueller skipping school, and there are lots of hijinks that ensue because of that. And now, although he is the villain in the film. Really, the true antagonist is played by Jennifer Grey, who plays Ferris's sister. And because she's upset that Ferris gets away with everything all the time. Matter of fact, he's going to Cubs game, going out to a fine dining for lunch and an art gallery. And the things that Ferris gets away with, it gets to his sister, and she wants desperately to get Ferris in trouble. But when it comes to Mr. Rooney, there's a united front, and that's the kind of cool thing. And spoiler alert, who am I kidding? Everybody's seen this movie, right? But Principal Rooney is played by somebody who's actually a real-life villain, Jeffrey Jones. And I'm not going to get into this podcast, all the stuff that Jeffrey Jones has been in trouble for, but if you look it up, he had some legal issues. And I was mentioning to somebody that we can really watch this movie, and even though we know he's kind of a dirtbag in real life, we can watch this movie, and because he plays a dirtbag in the movie. So anyway, so that's my take on that. But it's a fun film. Ferris Bueller's Day Off is a fun film. There is another moment of we got 15 minutes of angst. Boy, that John Hughes tapped into teenage angst as well as anybody in the 80s, and maybe as well as anybody ever. I don't know of any director that's tapped into teenage feelings this well, this many times. But Ferris and Cameron are out there having fun and doing everything, skipping school late in their senior year, and it's just a fun film. And if you don't like it, I don't know how I can be friends with you. No, it's a fantastic movie in my opinion, and I really enjoy it every time I see it. The great performance by Edie McClure, by the way, who plays Principal Rooney's secretary. Some really great moments from her. Charlie Sheen has a fun scene with Jennifer Grey, and Christy Swanson, who you also heard in that clip a minute ago. She's the kid who explains where Ferris is. But anyway, this is a pivotal moment for John Hughes. He's made 4 teenage movies, and then he went and made Planes, Trains, and Automobiles in 1987. Not a teen comedy at all. It starred Steve Martin and the late, great John Candy. And we've talked about John Candy a couple of times on this podcast, and we sure do miss him. Well, Steve Martin and John Candy play 2 guys that are in New York who are trying to get to Chicago. And everything goes against them. And one thing leads to another, and they end up basically with each other the entire way to Chicago, much to the chagrin of Steve Martin's character. He did not like hanging out with John Candy at all. This is an adult comedy. It's serious at times, but it really is an adult comedy. I think you have to, almost have to be an adult to appreciate the circumstances that are involved. It's Thanksgiving time. Not too many Thanksgiving movies. Why aren't there more Thanksgiving movies? It's just interesting to think about. And as an aside, I've always liked Thanksgiving better than Christmas. But that's just me. And I know a lot of people just turn the podcast off and are tired of listening to my voice. But I will get back to Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. It is a very serious film at certain points. And it shows this time not the angst of teenagers, but the angst of adults having to deal with serious issues. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is really probably the most heralded, critically heralded films of John Hughes' career, as far as the ones that he directed. Got mostly the best ratings, but fantastic film, and it's a must-see if you haven't seen it. He followed up with She's Having a Baby in 1988. Depicts married life. Again, adult life is hard. But stars Kevin Bacon and Elizabeth McGovern. The film got bad reviews, and I'm not really a fan of this film. I'm just going to say it up front. I'm not really a fan of this film. But the soundtrack I'm not a fan of either. It is a romantic comedy, but this is one, in my opinion, pretty bad blemish on John Hughes' career. If you like the film, I'm good for you, but I'm just not a fan. But the next film I am a really huge fan of, and this is Uncle Buck. And this one, I think, is hard to say, but I put this for completely different reasons. I put it up there with 16 Candles and The Breakfast Club. Like, which one of my of those three are my favorites of John Hughes? It probably depends on the last one I watched. But what a good movie. Uncle Buck, to me, is a masterpiece. Stars John Candy playing the Uncle Buck. And it's all about how, once again, we have a situation where we have adult problems. These poor guys, this poor couple, they have to trust Uncle Buck to come stay with the kids, and they don't trust him because he's a gambler, he's a drinker, he's a smoker, and he's just not very well trusted. Doesn't have kids, never had them, and so they don't trust him. But Buck comes and earns the respect and love of the children, and it's just such a warm film, and there's so many great moments in it. John Candy is really at his best in this film.
Have you ever tuna? You ever hear of a ritual killing? I don't get it. You know how to face in public like that again, and you'll be one.
Where do you live?
In the city.
Do you have a house?
Apartment.
On a rent?
Rent.
What do you do for a living?
Lots of things.
Where's your office?
I don't have one.
How come?
I don't need one.
Where's your wife?
Don't have one.
How come?
It's a long story.
Do you have kids?
No, I don't.
How come?
It's an even longer story.
Are you my dad's brother?
What's your record for consecutive questions asked?
38.
I'm your dad's brother, all right.
You have much more hair on your nose than my dad.
How nice of you to notice.
I'm a kid, that's my job.
Just a fun movie. Uncle Buck is the pancake scene is priceless. The scene with the principal, another principal that's a bad guy. Imagine that. It's fantastic. All of the whole Bug parts. Bug is the boyfriend, the girl, and he's not a good guy. And John Hughes is once again able to have two villains in the same movie that don't have the same purpose. We have the principal and we have Bug. And again, there's some serious moments in this film too. And the film is really from Buck's perspective. I think Planes, Trains, and Automobiles with John Candy, I think Steve Martin plays the plays the protagonist in that a little bit more. And we feel sorry for him because he's stuck with John Candy all that time. And then when John Candy gets really humanized later, that's whenever some of the sadness or melancholy nature of the film, kind of creeps in. But Uncle Buck has those moments too, where he has to earn the respect of the kids. There's also a really great scene involving Laurie Metcalf. She was funny in this movie too. But Buck's gambling and drinking and overall lazy nature doesn't impress his sister-in-law, and so it took a lot for her to let Buck come be with the kids. And tragically, the last film that was directed by John Hughes was called Curly Sue. And this is going to dovetail into the next subject, John Hughes. Let's see, Curly Sue came out in 91, and it starred Jim Belushi and Allison Porter, and she plays Curly Sue. And they're scam artists, and there's some, it shows that this film. It shows that John Hughes kind of lost his way, and he went from really capturing that teen angst to making a film like Curly Sue. And I'll explain where we get to Curly Sue in a moment. But it was a bomb, and Hughes never directed again. So what happened to him? What happened to John Hughes? Well, I'm going to tell you right now, Home Alone happened to John Hughes. He produced Home Alone in 1990, the year before Curly Sue, his last film that he directed. And John Hughes, when you look at his IMDb, he went from making these teenage movies to, we made a few movies about adults, to now he's making movies, these family-friendly, fun kids movies. And Home Alone was such a huge film that I think he spent the rest of his career trying to recreate another Home Alone. So he did do a sequel to it, produce a sequel to Home Alone, and it was also successful, and it was also funny, for that matter. But John Hughes got away from what he did best, which was capturing that teenager angst, and he was able to do it with adults too. He captured in 15 minutes. He could really nail down a couple of scenes that would make you feel like the characters that were not very likable a few moments ago, all of a sudden you can identify with them a little bit. But he produced after Curly Sue, or let's put it this way, after Home Alone, he went on and produced Career Opportunities, which is another film with John Candy, and it also had teenagers, Frank Whaley and Jennifer Connelly as the main characters in the film. So he got back to that a little bit, and then he also produced Only the Lonely, which I think is a terrific John Candy vehicle. But then he goes to Dutch, a movie with a kid, Home Alone 2, another movie with a kid, Dennis the Menace, Baby's Day Out, 101 Dalmatians, Flubber, Home Alone 3. What in the world happened here to John Hughes? It's hard really to comprehend, but he was also a writer. He wrote the screenplay. He wrote 51 screenplays, but a couple of the screenplays he wrote were the Beethoven movies. There's, 5 of those or 6 of those? Just terrible. What happened? Why did he do this? I think it's because the success of Home Alone got to him, and he thought, well, this is how I'm really going to make money, by doing these family-friendly kids movies, and he got away from what he did best. And when he was at his best, I mean, in the 80s, was there anyone better? I don't know if anybody had more commercial success than John Hughes in the 80s. He's certainly not anyone had more success with teenage movies. There were some copycat films from it. There were a lot of copycats. There were a lot of teenage movies in the 80s. But John Hughes did it best, and he really tapped into those feelings. He wrote for like 51 screenplays, and including all the vacation movies, even up to the 2015 one. He wrote some of that script. But his career did tail off. But he did have that tremendous success, and there's just nobody quite like John Hughes and his run that he had in the 80s, from 1984 to 1990. We'll just say, amazing run. So what ultimately is John Hughes' legacy? Well, he died in 2009, and was of a heart attack, and it was unexpected, and I felt the loss that day. We all had a loss that day. If you grew up in the 80s, then you lost a little something when John Hughes died. But the following year, we had this at the Oscar celebration in 2010.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Molly Ringwald and Matthew Broderick. In life, there is always that special person who shapes who you are, who helps you determine the person you become. For me, that person was John Hughes, a brilliant writer, director, and friend who saw something in me at the age of 16 that I didn't even see in myself. But John saw something in all of us. His genius was taking the pain of growing up and relating it to everyone. His gift was creating characters, stories, and truths about being a team and bringing them to film in a way that no one had ever done before. It is why his influence endures.
As an actor, I just listened to John and I did whatever he told me. And thanks to him, for the last 25 years, nearly every day, someone comes up to me, taps me on the shoulder, and says, "Hey, Ferris."
So that was kind of cool. Unfortunately, Molly Ringwald although she's tap danced around it, she's said a few negative things about the Breakfast Club and also 16 Candles, probably especially 16 Candles. She's said a couple of negative things about them, but she also knows that she owes her whole acting career to those two films. She's not in them, and they probably aren't going to. She's probably not going to be a big star. And I think you can almost say definitely not going to be a big star. But he shaped the career of Molly Ringwald and helped boost Matthew Broderick's career with Ferris Bueller's Day Off, although he probably was going to go on to do whatever. But I think that having Ferris Bueller's Day Off in his back pocket, or a feather in his cap, so to speak, I think that really helped him. And interestingly, Matthew Broderick didn't want to do Ferris Bueller's Day Off. He actually was tired of playing a teenager, but he said, "Hey, I'll do it one more time." And boy, I bet he's glad that he did at this point. And I want to, as a note, bring up some more films that John Hughes had his hands on. Pretty in Pink, not my favorite film, but a lot of people really enjoyed that movie. He wrote and produced that. He also wrote and produced Some Kind of Wonderful in 1987. And he also wrote and produced the Great Outdoors with John Candy and Dan Aykroyd. So he had a special relationship with John Candy, although although I think the two, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think John Candy and John Hughes actually were not getting along at the time of John Candy's death. So I'm not positive of that. But of course, you got the Home Alone movies. You got Flubber in 1997, and all those silly Beethoven movies. And he wrote he wrote a lot of screenplays, 51 screenplays. Had a brilliant mind, and we do miss him. Well, okay, I guess that's it for our chat about John Hughes. This is David Heath. I am your humble host of this little show that's growing. I want to say thank you very much to everybody for listening. And we have over 12,000 fans now, and it's exciting to know that. So I will keep trying to push these podcasts out, and hopefully you will keep listening. And this is Cinema Chat, the podcast where we talk about the movies and the people that made them.
What was that? Eat my shorts. You just bought yourself another Saturday, mister. Crushed. You just bought one more right there. Well, I'm free the Saturday after that. Beyond that, I'm going to have to check my calendar. Good. Because it's going to be filled. We'll keep going. You want another one? Say the word. Just say the word. Instead of going to prison, you'll come here. Are you through? No. I'm doing society a favor. So, that's another one right now. I've got you for the rest of your natural born life if you don't watch your step. You want another one? Yes. You got it. You got another one right there. That's another one, pal. Cut it out. You through? Not even close. Good. You got one more right there. You really think I give a shit? Another. You through? How many is that? That's 7, including when we first came in. You asked Mr. Bernier whether Barry Manilow knew that he raided his closet. Now it's 8. You stay out of it. Excuse me, sir, it's 7. Shut up, Pee-wee. You're a mind bender. For 2 months, I got you. What can I say? I'm thrilled. Oh, I'm sure that's exactly what you want these people to believe. You know something, Bender? You want to spend a little more time trying to do something with yourself and a little less time trying to impress people. You might be better off. Right, that's it. I'm going to be right outside those doors. The next time I have to come in here, I'm cracking skulls.
Okay, hi. So I am with Tracey Morgan. And Tracey Morgan, I've talked with before on the podcast. She authored the book Searching for Candy, a book all about John Candy and pretty much everything John Candy. It was kind of like a fan book, but also it contained tons of interviews with several collaborators, including Mel Brooks, and who else was in there? I'm trying to remember. Hi, Tracey.
There was, hi, David. There was the late Carl Reiner, bless his heart.
That's right, Carl Reiner. Yeah.
Very sad about to be honest. From sort of crew to friends to colleagues and people that worked with him over the years, and just chance encounters as well.
And you're working on a new book, and we'll get back to it. But tell us about your new book that you're working on right now that got getting out.
Well, at the moment, I'm working on Those Aren't Pillows, which is a fan's guide, basically, to planes, trains and automobiles. And it's had quite a lot of diversions and twists and turns, just like the film, really. So hopefully it might be out in November, but it could well be delayed. I've not found Del Griffith on the way yet, but I'm hoping to at some stage. If I can find a Del Griffith through this whole journey of writing this book, I'd be very happy.
Well, November is when this is likely to post, and so hopefully by then we'll have something in concrete, and if not, then you'll keep me updated when it does come out.
I will, certainly, thank you.
Well, Tracey, thank you very much for coming on, and we are talking about John Hughes, and I brought you on this program so you could talk extensively about John Hughes and John Candy. But before he ever collaborated with John Candy, John Hughes was known to be a director of films that somehow connected with teenagers, and I kind of like to call it the Big Four, where we've got 16 Candles, The Breakfast Club, Weird Science, and of course Ferris Bueller's Day Off. So Tracey, when did you first become acquainted with John Hughes' work?
I think my first introduction to John Hughes would have been Weird Science, and that's purely because I had an older brother and I used to hang on every word that he sort of said, and he introduced me to music and films, and he was my introduction to John Candy as well. But he used to watch Weird Science over and over and over again, so I knew that film sort of inside out as I was growing up, and I just loved it. It was brilliant. It was like, underdog, basically, you can get in the girl, isn't it, really? In a very strange way. But I just loved the characters and the detail that he put into that film. And sort of later on, of course, there was Ferris Bueller's and 16 Candles and The Breakfast Club I love as well. But I think he's a genius, isn't he, really? I mean, he kind of got into younger people's heads, thought exactly what they would be thinking, relate to them, sort of distill that and then project it onto the big screen. And I don't think anyone really got us in the movies like he did, and nobody else sort of really managed to do that for kids growing up in the 80s. I don't think he really managed to tap into that.
Right, and it's really kind of it was an amazing thing that he was able to do, and I mentioned earlier in the podcast before you came on, I compared, say, 16 Candles to Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and I said I felt like that 16 Candles took that type of humor and took it to a different level, and they made a film. Oh gosh, forgive me if I have it wrong, but I feel like Fast Times at Ridgemont High was about an hour and 50 minutes, and 16 Candles was closer to an hour and 30. I may be wrong on that, but it is a faster paced film, and he took some humor and somehow made quite a bit of gutter humor into a PG film.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He was pretty good at that.
And there's a lot of gutter humor in there that just somehow, it's PG. Even though we've got, bare breasts, we've got all kinds of sexual jokes and innuendo and coming out of our ears, but yet it's still PG. And so it's kind of funny, but we go to The Breakfast Club, which is a little more vulgar, but quite a bit more serious. And and then you, of course, have like you talked about Weird Science. I really enjoy Weird Science too, and I put that, like most people probably wouldn't, but I put it right up there with the other three.
I agree. I absolutely agree. Yeah, it's perfect in that sense. It's kind of because he had like the cool kids in the Breakfast Club, and I know they weren't seen as the cool kids, but to me they were seen as the cool kids. And then you had like the nerds in Weird Science, and he kind of went and sort of looked at every sort of group, I guess, in that sort of era. But yeah, no, I agree. I think Weird Science is right up there. And what a great idea, you know, who would come up with something like that and make it so believable as well.
Right.
Yeah.
It is amazing. Now, of course, your expertise lies with with John Candy, and he, of course, came in to the career of John Hughes in 1987, and cue Plane, Trains, and Automobiles, and you obviously have a special adoration for this film. Tell the audience what you think about that film in general.
Yeah, well, to me, it's probably one of the most perfect films you can watch. In terms of the writing, the casting, and the chemistry on and off set, I think just really shines through. And I think it's just such a warm-hearted film that this is why literally it's kind of been timeless. And year after year, Thanksgiving comes and everybody sits down and watches it. Even if you're not in the US and you don't necessarily celebrate Thanksgiving, you still watch it because Christmas is coming, and love it. And it kind of makes you laugh until you cry, and then it makes you bawl like a baby, and it just kind of gets all the feels. And I think Paul Hirsch said, who was the editor on Planes, Trains and Automobiles, he said the brilliant thing about John Hughes was that he sort of calls him a skilled miniaturist, because you can take a very simple situation and then weave it endlessly elaborate. Oh, sorry, that's my phone.
That's all right.
Oh, sorry, I'm on my phone as well. I'm so sorry, can you cut that out?
No, it's right, yeah.
My apologies.
No worries.
So I'll go back to Paul Hirsch. Paul Hirsch, who was the editor on Planes, Trains and Automobiles, he actually said that John Hughes was like a skilled miniaturist. He could sort of take a simple situation and then weave endlessly elaborate and hilarious complications into it and make it believable. And I think that's a perfect example in Planes, Trains and Automobiles. And we've all been stuck with somebody that we thought may be a bit annoying, and we've all, been stuck somewhere where we wanted to get home to our family. And I think at the end, you just have this beautiful lesson where actually, I think Steve Martin's character, Neil Page, I think he was probably more lonely than Del, if we're being honest. And what you don't see in that film is that actually Del pretty much saves Neil's marriage, because going right back, am I right to talk about this? There's so many deleted scenes.
Sure.
And actually going back to old scripts, you would see Mrs. Page talking to Neil on the phone, and they kind of have a very brief conversation in the film, and then he hangs up and she's like, you've been diverted to Wichita, and then she finds out he's staying with a man in a motel. And what you don't see that was written into the script was she was convinced that Neil was having an affair, that this was all being made up and fabricated because he was spending time with another woman. And so she thought Del Griffith was made up. So when you actually get to the end of that film and you see the relief in her eyes when he brings Del Griffith home, he's actually saved the marriage. In one scene she was saying, as soon as Thanksgiving's over, I'm leaving him. To her parents, we'll get that out the way, then I'm going to leave him. And you can just see that relief in her eyes. And there's so many parts to that film that I think the initial cut was 4.5 hours. They had to cut so much out of it. I would have just loved the director's cut, because there were so many other stories interwoven into that. And I think although it's a beautiful film by itself, when you actually know what was cut out and where it was heading, it kind of makes it even all the more richer, I think.
Yes, it's definitely an amazing film, and I remember seeing it at the movie theater, and I was only 16 at the time, and I remember looking at it, and I, even though we were much like the earlier films that John Hughes made, the teenage films, I was a teenager and able to connect with these adults, and I found myself kind of understanding their predicaments. And I think he spelled it out. And John Hughes, I think he spelled it out, the predicaments of the people involved, in very plain English, where it was easy for anybody that's watching to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. So relatable and so human. You really felt for them, both characters really, and you fell in love with both of them by the end, I think. He was so talented at that, and he wrote that film, pretty much the bare bones of it anyway, in a weekend. Like, he would just sit down, he would write and write and write, and that was the best way for him to work, because he would then know at the end of that weekend whether it was actually something he wanted to continue with or not. So to write a film like that and get all those details in within 2 or 3 days, he wouldn't go to bed, John Hughes, very often. He would work through the night. And I think when he became really good friends with John Candy, which was on Planes and Trains, they'd worked with each other very briefly before in National Lampoons. But Planes and Trains was where they sort of really sealed their friendship. They were both kind of very similar characters. They both were very much the family man. They weren't interested in that side of Hollywood. They were very faithful to their wives. They loved their kids. They loved ideas. They loved each other. They loved staying up. They loved smoking. One of them loved drinking rum and coke. The other one loved drinking coke. And they would literally stay up for hours chatting on the phone and just bouncing ideas off each other. So I think they were very, very similar. And I think from that, with Planes, Trains, if you look in the early work, Molly Ringwald sort of really became John Hughes' muse. Later on, I think that was John Candy. And he kind of got to know him so well. And I remember watching an interview with Edie McClure, who basically said that in Planes, Trains, John Hughes had taken Steve Martin's actual personality, which was sort of quite shy and quite sensible, believe it or not. You see him off the stage, quite shy and quite sensible, and wanted to keep himself to himself. And John's character, which was quite outgoing and loved life, and then sort of exaggerated both of those to make it work, which it did. I just think there's so much talent there, and who could write something like that in 3 days, 2-3 days? Unbelievable. Who could stay up all night and still focus? It's hilarious.
Yeah. You mentioned Edie McClure. I have to ask, what was meeting her like?
I didn't actually interview her. I watched an interview with her.
It sounded like it sounded like you said you actually met her, and I was like, you were paying attention to an interview. Because I always kind of wonder, is she that person that you see on the screen?
I think she would be. I believe she was absolutely lovely. Unfortunately, I think she suffers from dementia these days. As I would certainly try and interview her. But yeah, I believe. John Hughes obviously loved her because he used her several times. He was very loyal to anyone that he liked. And I think she was meant to be an hilarious comedian. And certainly that whole gobble gobble scene in Planes and Trains, where Steve Martin's waiting anxiously to speak to her, and before he drops the F-bomb for like 19 times. She improvised an awful lot of that, and she was very good at improvising. I'm sure she still is. But yeah, so unfortunately never got to speak to her. Would absolutely love to.
Yeah, that would be nice. And then we go from Planes, Trains to, and I'm going to remind everybody that Tracey has written a book, or is writing a book, and trying to finally get it out there about Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Just such a tremendous movie, and I'm going to encourage everybody, if you like this conversation, I know you're going to love that book. If you like this conversation, I know you'll love Searching for Candy. Never met anyone with such utter passion for a subject more than Tracey Morgan about John Candy, and it's just lovely. Yes, absolutely. And we go from Planes, Trains, and Automobiles to Uncle Buck, which was another classic, and I actually call it a masterpiece. I think it's I think it's so perfectly written and well produced. I think that it's cut well. And John Candy, I think that this film utilizes John Candy's comedic talents to the absolute fullest, where he's carrying. We saw John Candy, in Splash and Stripes, be such a real force in the film, and the movie's not going to be the same without John Candy in either instance. But in Uncle Buck, he takes the film on his back and just carries it all the way himself.
I absolutely agree. Yeah, absolutely.
It's just this is his film, in my opinion, John Candy's film. But John Hughes, of course, directed it, produced it, and wrote it. What do you think about Uncle Buck?
I think you summed it up perfectly, to be honest. I absolutely love Uncle Buck, and John Candy is Uncle Buck. And I think everybody needs an Uncle Buck, really. And I think it kind of showed that sort of, when John Hughes was doing Planes, Trains and Uncle Buck and going into sort of later films like that, it sort of showed him growing up as well, really, that he was getting older himself, so he thought he better focus on maybe some adult characters. But really, we're all just big kids at heart, and that's what Uncle Buck is. He's just a big kid with a huge heart. And okay, maybe his family finds it embarrassing, but do you know what? Oh my goodness, I wish I had one.
Yeah.
I wish I had an uncle like that would make me pancakes as well.
Oh, yeah.
And I think John, he bleeds a little bit of himself into everything he does. So I think a lot of John Candy came across, and I know in interviews that I've heard his daughter do, she said, for her, he was Uncle Buck. If you were to say, what was he like in real life? He was probably a lot sterner than Uncle Buck because he was a good dad, and he was quite strict in the right ways. But he was Uncle Buck. He's everything you imagined him to be. And I love that because, what a wonderful character. He just embodied him, really. And I think that was John Hughes' strength, was that he because he knew John Candy inside and out, I believe there was a way that they would communicate on set. They wouldn't even really need to talk that much. It was kind of like they shared the same brain almost, and they kind of had like their own language. And John would give John Candy direction, but he would also let him ad-lib. And so many times, I believe, John Candy would be waiting for him to say cut, and he wouldn't. And John's eyes would flicker and then continue. And he used to get him into lots of trouble, I think, because John Hughes always used to have too much film, used to overrun on set times and things like that. But just wonderful that he would just look for all those tiny sort of small details that everybody else would miss, and how wonderful that he had so many takes of John, and that they could sort of, even the lift of an eyebrow might just be improvised, and it's perfect for that moment. So he kind of really, really didn't rush his work. He kind of really put a lot of thought and effort in, and made sure that it was just right. And I think John Candy was very similar in terms of the way he works. He wanted to get it as best as it could be. I think that they were just two peas in a pod, really.
Yeah, and they went on to work together in, as John Hughes being the producer in several more films, but of course Home Alone being one of them, and this little bitty picture. I don't know if you heard of it, but little
Did you know?
just a little bitty, this little bitty film. It didn't do all that well at the box office. Kind of a little sleeper hit or something, but I do have a question for you, Tracy, and this is a curveball. Did Home Alone actually hurt John Hughes' career, because he never went back to the well as far as like we all agree that Home Alone is a fun movie. It's a nice little Christmas movie. So much great humor in it. So it really is a fantastic film. Very well done. The whole family can enjoy it. But is there a back end problem with Home Alone in that John Hughes got away from the human element of things?
I don't know, because I still think there was the human element in Home Alone. Especially where John Candy was concerned, when you think of the Gus Polanski giving a mother a lift home. I mean, I know it was probably a little far-fetched for somebody to leave their child at home and completely forget me. She had a lot of kids, so I can understand that as difficult. I guess for me it was sort of a bit of a diversion, but I don't know if that hurt his career as such. I think everybody goes into writing films, directing films, but nobody knows how that actually going to turn out. So John Hughes had a lot of hits. Do you know what I mean? When you have a lot of hits, people expect you to keep that up all the time. Well, it's a lot of pressure because you want to sort of experiment a bit. And for me, I don't think it would have hurt his career. I think what actually sort of sealed the deal of him leaving Hollywood was actually losing John Candy. That was a massive, massive influence. I know that they wanted to work together. They had plans for many more films. I know that they wanted to do, they were lined up to do a film called Bartholomew versus Neff, which John Candy was going to be a co-lead in with Sylvester Stallone, which unfortunately never happened. I think John Hughes just had all these plans, and then when he lost his friend John Candy, they were best friends. I think he kind of blamed Hollywood a little bit for working John Candy too hard and decided to step right back. So I think had he have kept going, had John still been around, I think they would have sort of progressed and done other films, and you would have still seen him around. But I think he was just really concerned. He had a young family, about how Hollywood was going to affect them. He saw how it affected John Candy, and I think he just thought, okay, I'm going to step back. So I think had you just given him a bit more time, I think he would have come a full circle, if you know what I mean, in a way. But
that's probably a valid point. I mentioned earlier in the podcast, before you and I started communicating about this subject, and I want to thank you again, Tracey, because you've added an element to this that's just fantastic. It's all when I started researching for this particular podcast, I thought, I've got all this information about John Hughes, and I was so busy worrying about Molly Ringwald and Anthony Michael Hall and those earlier films. And then when I started looking at John Candy, I said, I better see if Tracey Morgan will come in on this with me and talk about just the John Candy aspect of things. I heard that they had some sort of falling out. Is that not the case?
Are you talking about Uncle Buck? Are you talking about when they were filming Uncle Buck, John Candy? He would often, go out and he would stay up a lot, and he would go make friends all over the place. He could walk into an empty bar and make 10 friends, and he did that one night, and he stayed up all night. And I know that when he got there in the morning, and he was there on time, and he was prepared and ready. But John Hughes had heard on the radio that John Candy had been out that night, and he'd been at various bars because they were talking about it on a morning show. He was very angry, very angry, and sent John home for the day because he was that annoyed with him. But other than that, there's no sort of major falling out that I know about. But I think there's certain things that happen on set, and let's face it, best friends fall out as well. We all get on each other's nerves, especially when you're working in such pressurized conditions. But as far as I'm aware, that's as bad as it got. So not too bad at all.
It's too bad that you were unable to interview John Hughes about John Candy, and his eyes probably would have lit up if you had the chance. But
I would have loved to. He would have made me cry. I know that much. He would have made me cry. I think because I think he loved John so much.
Wow.
They loved each other so much. And I mean, even now, unfortunately, John Hughes' wife passed away last year, I think. But the Hugheses and the Candys, they're still friends now.
Oh, that's great to know. You've really relieved me, because I heard that there was a falling out that was more than that, but I would think you would know more about it than the source that I heard it from. So
what did you hear? Can you tell me?
I heard a couple of people talking on another podcast And I couldn't even tell you the name of it because I don't recall. I listen.
That's okay.
The podcasts go through me almost like liquid or something. Because I eat, sleep, and breathe podcasts along with movies. I have podcasts about movies. That seems to be my lot in life. Hey, let's watch a movie and then listen to a 2-hour podcast about it. There's some 4-hour podcasts that I've heard about hour-and-a-half long movies.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like,
wow.
it takes me all day to listen to it because, you got interruptions. No, I heard a couple of, we'll just call them yahoos, talking about how they had some sort of a falling out, and maybe they were probably just making a whole lot more out of that Uncle Buck issue than what was really there. Clearly they still adored each other at the end of John Candy's life, and I'm sure that if you ask John Hughes in 2008, what he felt about John Candy, he probably, you called him the muse. I think that there's a chance that he would probably say John Candy was just as important as those earlier teenagers were in his film.
You're right, yeah. And I mean, like I know John Candy certainly valued John Hughes so much because he thought he brought so much to his career. And he was just so excited that somebody would write. It was almost like they were in his head. And, when we talk about Home Alone, I know we're not sort of focusing on that. But, it was a case of John Hughes said, I need a favour, and he's like, tell me where and when, and I'll just be there. And as parts went on, that was pretty much how they worked, because Candy trusted Hughes that much, and Hughes would always write with Candy in mind. If there was any fallings out, they wouldn't have been for very long. They adored each other.
Yeah, so good to know. Yeah, I honestly, I couldn't even tell you where I heard that. I think I was listening to a podcast specifically about, I don't even remember what it was about, so we'll just skip it. I wanted to go to a trusted resource on that, though. Good to know. Tracy, I really appreciate you. You came on here at really short notice too, and I really thank you for. I think I asked you yesterday, hey, you want to talk tomorrow about John Candy and John Hughes, and you just jumped right on, and that's awesome. I love that.
Oh no, well thank you for asking me. It's an absolute joy to be on. I really appreciate it. Love your podcast, so it's great.
One thing I really would like to do is I'd like to have you on at least one more time, and when your book does come out. At some point, I'd like to really break down the film Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. And what is it going to be called again?
It's going to be called Those Aren't Pillows. Mm-hmm. It's a fan's guide to planes, trains, and automobiles. I would absolutely love that because there's so much. There's so many, like I found old scripts and script revisions and things. There's so much that was cut out, and although the film is perfect, when I watch it, there's so many different things. But I can tell you now about it. I can tell you how Belle got that black eye at the end because that's never explained. And there's sort of like all these little things that come through. There was even behind the scenes sort of like flashback scenes with his Marie, his wife, who was just a photo in the actual film, and there's so many elements to it. I would absolutely love to talk about it.
Oh, fantastic. Well, Tracey, you are a joy, and so look for that book, everyone, and look for Searching for Candy, which is available now. Searching for Candy, and it's all about John Candy and his films and his travails during making those films, and you cover a little bit of his earlier life and also the unfortunate ending. But it is such a pleasure having you on, and once again, I can't thank you enough for enhancing this show and your presence, and you're so pleasant, and it's so great to talk to somebody that's so pleasant. So we both wish we could have about 30 more John Candy movies to break down, but 33 at least. So he would hit 100.
That would would be nice. That would have been good.
Yeah, he'd have 100 credits if he made 33 more films. But you take care, and thank you again. I can't thank you enough, and I will post links for searching for Candy, and as soon as I have something for the Planes, Trains, and Automobiles book, those aren't pillows. We'll look for that too, and I definitely will get back with you on breaking down that film in really good detail. And
fantastic. Thank you.
Well, take care, Tracey. Thank you.
And you. Thank you so much. You take care. Thanks for the great work you're doing.
All right.
Take care. Bye. Bye.
So that is Tracey Morgan, and she is just a joy and a half to talk with. So thank you to Tracey Morgan, and also thank you to Liane Curtis. John Hughes was a unique filmmaker. He, of course, directed 8 films, and we've already outlined 8 of them, or all 8 of them. And I really appreciate Liane Curtis, and I really appreciate Tracey Morgan for appearing on the show for a second time. And this is Cinema Chat. And we have been talking about legendary filmmaker John Hughes. And this is the podcast where we talk about the movies and the people that made them. I am your humble host, David Heath. And I want to say thank you very much for listening. And after 2 hours and 23 minutes, if you're still checked in, bless your heart. I appreciate you.
Yep. I said it before and I'll say it again. Life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.